What's happening, everybody? Great to be back in your life with the MMA Eco Live podcast. Took a week off last week because I was traveling. Every year I get to do this thing with my college buddies where we get together, spend a couple days together. These guys, I lived with them in college, and it's been 10 years since we all lived together. But every year we get together. Last week we were out in Colorado and had a great time doing it. But I am really excited to be back on this podcast. Missed it last week. Had a busy weekend in Asian MMA, which I'll get to. But basically, if you don't know me, my name is Chris Presnell. I'm the owner of MMA Ecosystem, which is a website. It's this YouTube channel. It's social media. Everything I can get my hands on to cover Asian MMA and give it the credit that it deserves. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to this channel to get all the latest videos right away. Follow me on Insta, on Twitter, or X, and we will see you there. So today's show, what I'm going to do is kind of review a little bit of last weekend, in particular the Asian fighters, and then I'll look forward to this upcoming weekend at UFC Riyadh, where we have, oddly enough, a final for Road to UFC, which is one of our favorite topics around here. And then I'll kind of touch on some kind of newsy stuff after that. You can drop your questions anytime that you want. All right, let's get into things right away. I do have a hard cutoff in an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm gonna try to be efficient here while still getting deeply into some of these topics. I actually did quite a bit of tape study today, both for this fight this weekend at Riyadh and then also the fights from last weekend. Let's talk about those real quick. So a number of Asian fighters on this UFC Vegas 94 card in the Apex. We're supposed to have 4. The Josh Van versus Tagir Ulanbekov fight tragically fell through last week, and so we're left with 3. Overall, Asian fighters went 1 and 2, with the winning fighter being Tatsuro Taira. And even though I didn't get to watch them live, I did watch back through all of them again today to see kind of evaluating each person's performance. Well, let's start with Shailan. So I think we really saw a lot of where Shailan is at in this fight against Maikizo Costa. In the fight, Shailan, he is a guy that's gone between featherweight and lightweight. And so he cuts a lot of weight to get down to featherweight. And he is an exceptional wrestler. When he is able to dictate where the fight is and then kind of settle in there, then he can start to work his offense. And that usually is getting the fight to the ground. He has a lot of different ways to get the fight to the ground. You saw him both use some kind of Greco throws on Costa, and you also saw him do some more like traditional American wrestling kind of stuff to ankle picks, things like that. And a lot of great things to like about his performance, but overall, he ends up getting submitted in the 3rd round. Well, why did that happen? I think that as I watch Shailan, it seems like a lot of his issues kind of stem around strength and conditioning, and they stem around, which kind of ties into energy management. And then also, I think you really saw some of the limits of his grappling game as well. So he's an exceptional wrestler. Once he got the fight to the ground, wasn't always able to do a whole lot with it. He hung out in guard, hung out in half guard. He did attempt the knee bar on Costa, but not really super close to finishing that. He doesn't really, in this fight, he didn't throw a whole lot of strikes when he was on the ground in the top position. So he's kind of showing me that he has some limits of his offense once he gets the fight to the ground. Really, really exceptionally strong guy. Great wrestler, but a little bit limited there. I think also just the weight and what size he wants to be at has been a little bit of a struggle for him. He's gone back and forth between 155 and 145. When he cuts down to 145, he looks really, really kind of emaciated, seems like it's a really hard cut for him. And so I wonder if that's part of why you can see him slow down a little bit. Against Costa, it looked like by the third round, he still was like trying to do the right thing, but just had lost a little bit of speed in the reaction of his scrambles. And that's what eventually, led Costa to taking his back and not being able to really work out of it. I just think that he was a little bit drained from the weight cut. And so that's a tough spot to be in because he's 5'8", and so he really could go back up to 155, but there are definitely just there's taller guys in there. So I think I would love to see him either I don't know. It's hard for me to say in my position what he should do with his body, whether you want to try to streamline the weight cutting process a little bit or try to fill out to 155 a little bit better and neutralize some of the disadvantages you feel like you have. But Shailon, he's in a tough spot. I don't know what his UFC record is, something around 4-4. It seems like he won a couple fights in a row and then he's now lost 2 in a row. So he's in a tough spot. I think that he really needs to emphasize working out the strength and conditioning, dieting kind of stuff for his next fight. But easier said than done. Obviously, I'm no expert. And then Jekka Sargi fought against Weston Wilson. Kind of a heartbreaker of a fight. Looked like, Jekka, he was coming out super wild. He's coming off momentum of his UFC debut and win. And then he gets submitted by Weston Wilson with a kind of triangle armbar in the first round. Basically, Jekka just needs to calm the F down. He came out so wild, and not necessarily wild in a good way. It was really wild in a reckless way. And I don't know if he thought that he was just going to be able to take Weston Wilson out really quickly in under a minute and just be able to immediately book another fight and keep that momentum going. Sometimes that aggression has gotten Jekka to where he's gotten right now, but he needs to focus it a little bit more. He just relies way too much on that aggression over tactics. And I underestimated Weston Wilson a lot too. It's not that he is in the UFC, whether you think he deserved that opportunity or not, is up for debate, but he is in the UFC. So the guy knows, if he's fighting a super over aggressive opponent, and he's off his back, he knows how to throw up an armbar. So you got to be careful with that. He gets in the armbar and Jekka just tries to slam out of it. Again, just using that intense, reckless aggression over methodically working out how to get away from it. So kind of a silly mistake there overall as a fight. I love Jekka's energy. I love his aggression, but I just wish that he would be able to focus it and hone it a little bit more. Losing to a guy kind of at the bottom of the heap like Weston Wilson is not a good look, but it is one that you can recover from if you can just learn from your mistakes and learn a little bit more control on Jekka's end. But I think he'll be okay ultimately. He just has to really, the UFC, he has to match him well for his next fight. And he just needs to get some coaching around him that's going to allow him to make better use of his abilities. In the main event, we had Tatsuro Taira fighting Alex Perez on a semi-short notice main event opportunity. Some fights at flyweight kind of got shuffled around in June. But overall, I thought Taira looked great against Alex Perez. People have often thought that his striking isn't up to par, or perhaps his strength and conditioning isn't up to par. Well, it seems like he is filling out into the 125-pound frame, actually starting to become a bigger guy at 125 pounds. And Perez was ranked at number 5 going into this fight. And I personally, even though Perez has had a lot of bad luck over the last couple of years, I thought this was going to be a tough fight for Taira. I thought he was jumping up faster than I would have liked to up into the flyweight top 5, but he met the fight really well. I'll just kind of jump ahead to the end and then work backwards. So the end of the fight, Tatsuro Taira, he's got the back kind of standing rear naked choke position on Perez and kind of hanging off of him a little bit, putting a lot of weight on Perez. And then not sure the exact point that the knee injury happened, but at some point in the process, Perez injures his knee, kind of drops down, and then verbally submits, and Taira wins the fight by TKO or injury. It's not really the kind of injury fight that you can really give much credit to Taira, as like there's some injury fights of like a guy's nose is busted open because he took 100 jabs to the face, or something with the leg due to like leg kicks, something like that, where you can kind of see where like his opponent was wearing him down en route to the injury. But this fight was a little bit more of a freak injury. However, Taira did look pretty good. The first round was really close. I think I may have scored it for Perez ever so slightly. Perez came out pretty aggressive. His boxing was on point, but Taira, something new that we got to see out of him was his clinch work. He pulled that tie clinch every time Perez came in close, either to try to attempt to try to wrestle with Taira, or just to go in and do some dirty boxing or close range punches. And Taira would clinch up with him, and he really did a lot of great work inside the clinch with the knees. That looked really sharp. And then even going into the second round, you saw Taira supplementing that clinch work with uppercuts when Perez would come close. So I think it's like, had the fight go on, who would have won a 5-round decision? We don't know. But Tatsuro Taira shows the ability to show us new wrinkles. Now, a lot of time he could have actually had a lot of these wrinkles under the hood. We just didn't get to see them. But at least fighting a guy who's a pretty good boxer, he was able to meet that head on and game plan effectively, show some really good offense and counter offense to that. So that's a really, really big feather in the cap of Tatsuro Taira. It makes you if anything, it makes you more confident, or like makes whoever he gets matched up against next a little bit harder, because you know that like you're seeing the way that he's thinking through and training for fights, even on semi-short notice. So hats off to Taira and his whole team for it looks like they prepared him really well for this fight. And so you got to give him props for that. Also, I think the injury is unfortunate because it basically just calls a stop to the action and automatically awards the fight to the guy opposite of whoever got injured. So that's unfortunate that it ends that way. I think Perez definitely is the type of guy that could fight for 5 rounds and maybe like have a couple surges in momentum. And so we'll never know unless they rebook the fight, which I doubt they will. But I think the question now is like, how does Taira fit into the flyweight top 10 or even top 5? There were some people that were like, yeah, maybe went away from a title shot. Personally, I'd like to see 2 more up to a title shot. What I think the UFC will probably do is match him up one more time against another, someone like my perfect choice. I know this kind of goes against what I said, but I would just from a fan perspective, love to see the Brandon Royval fight. That would be an incredible fight. I mean, here's like, if you're trying to like maximize what's going on right now and you're the UFC, you book Tatsuro Taira against Brandon Royval in the main event of like a Tokyo show. How amazing would that be, guys? I thought that the UFC was a long ways away from booking a return to Japan, but especially now at the signing of Kai Asakura, I'm starting to feel, and I know that the UFC they do have a plan to build back towards a return to Japan. I don't know if that's a this year thing or even a next year thing, but I just feel like a Taira versus Royval main event, or you could set that as a co-main and have Kai Asakura in the main event. Also at flyweight, apparently, I don't know if you saw that Alex Bahunin reported that Kai Asakura was going to be fighting at flyweight. So I think that's really interesting. But there you go. Have a flyweight doubleheader in Tokyo, and you got yourselves a show there. So, but yeah, personally, I would like to see Taira fight maybe someone in like the 6 to 10 range, and then go for like a number 1 contender shot. if we just look at like who's in that top 10 right now and available, I know there's a handful of fighters that are kind of booked up or potentially like about to get booked up. So it sounds like Kai Kara France and Steve Urseg are going to fight at this Perth pay-per-view in August. And then Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kopp are fighting soon as well. So really that just gives you Mateus Nicolau, that gives you Amir Albazi and Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval. So if we're going for the like 6 to 10 range, that really just gives you Mateus Nicolau, which you could do that fight. He's coming off a loss. It wouldn't be the ideal fight to give against Tatsuro Taira, but so maybe if you do, gosh, you could wait and see who wins some of these upcoming flyweight fights, then match them up with a winner there. But honestly, yeah, if I'm just guessing, probably the UFC will match him up against either Albazi. Moreno would be really interesting and really tough, or against Brandon Royval. So fun stuff ahead for Tatsuro Taira. Really excited to see how this affects overall the UFC push back into Japan. So there you have it. There's last weekend's event. Let's chat a little bit about next weekend in 2 days. So we've got UFC Riyadh and the I guess you've got Kang Kyo Kang on that card. But opening up the whole event, oddly enough, you've got Lee Chong-ho versus Xiaolong for the bantamweight Season 2 Road to UFC tournament final. Fight that I reported a few months ago. And I watched back through the tape, guys, on this the most recent fight for each, because I've waffled back and forth who I think would win. Overall, I do think it's going to be a pretty close fight either way. I think this probably goes the full distance, the full 3 rounds, although there is an optional 4th round if the fight's a draw, just saying. But I think, when I look back against, I think this fight is going to be more exciting than a lot of people expect, because both of these guys push a pretty fast pace. If you look at Xiaolong's last fight against Shuya Kamikubo, he pushed such a strong pace against Shuya Kamikubo, was countering every time Kamikubo was jumping in for the takedown. And really at every possible moment he could get, he was putting volume in Kamikubo's face, sometimes a little bit recklessly, but he was giving him a lot to think about. So, and then the Daramisi and Lee Chong-ho fight, which was just 2 fights later on that same event, that same day, that was also a pretty fast-paced, intense fight. What I saw from both of those fighters, some similarities. Both guys had really good strength and conditioning. Each of them, Lee Chong-ho famously, he outlasted Daramisi's wrestling and grappling attack and was able to get the TKO later in the fight. And so his strength and conditioning looked pretty solid there. Xiaolong's gas tank looked incredible against Shuya Kamikubo. That was such a fast-paced fight. Both fighters just kind of moving at each other the whole fight. A lot of striking, even more takedowns, wrestling, grappling. And I think Xiaolong maybe only got taken down once in that fight for all of Shuya Kamikubo's efforts. When he did get taken down, he popped up pretty quickly. So, and then Lee Chong-ho, he was taken down, but he was never really in any super bad conditions, was able to get up a lot as well. So overall, at first I think I was most recently leaning towards Lee Chong-ho to win the fight, just because I thought that he was going to be the bigger, stronger guy, going to be able to dictate the fight. But after watching the fight over again, I'd kind of forgotten how intense of a pace Xiaolong had pushed. And being a 3-round fight, I think that probably you're going to see Xiaolong push a stronger pace, throw more hands in the process. And I think that kind of in the same way that he beat Shuya Kamikubo, I could see him working that same playbook against Lee Chong-ho. I don't know a whole lot about Lee's striking, and so I could be totally wrong, but it seemed like what I saw from the Shuya Kamikubo fight, not a whole lot of like, big combinations. He may be able to, I mean, he's a strong guy, so he may be able to land a couple damaging shots here and there. But I think overall, you're going to see Xiaolong push a really intense pace and just get ahead on the scorecards. Li Chong-ho probably going to have some really good moments in there. The grappling exchanges are going to be wild if they go there. But Xiaolong is a criminally like underestimated guy just because he has come up short so many times. He has underperformed relative to his potential so many times. And it seemed like the lid kind of came off a little bit in that last fight against Kamikubo. And so if he's able to channel that same energy in this fight on Saturday, I think he'll probably get the decision win, but I could see it even going down to like a split decision. So it's going to be close. Wouldn't be surprised if either fighter won. But glad that we're finally getting some resolution to this long-awaited bantamweight final. Let's talk about just kind of, road to UFC coming up. A couple, maybe like a week or two ago, I reported that the UFC was going to be going to Las Vegas for the road to UFC semifinals. I don't think I've talked about it on the show yet, but kind of a crazy thing going on there. You had the cancellation of UFC Hangzhou. They really wanted to have those road to UFC semis there, but didn't end up working out. And then, it's like, what do you do after that? Once you cancel an event, do you regroup? They ultimately just moved the semis to Las Vegas, which still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm trying to think of reasons why they would have done that. Getting everything set up in the PI in Shanghai, I've heard is a little bit of a hassle. Is it enough to move it to Las Vegas? I don't know, but my biggest concern is visas for for all these fighters. I don't expect, since it's the semifinal round, that they'll have a ton of issues with it, but yeah, who knows? They could have there's a lot of Chinese fighters, an Indian fighter, a couple Koreans, a couple Japanese, one Filipino guy. So hopefully they've been on it since day one and we get to see everyone in Las Vegas. Positives you can take from this is that these fighters get the experience of going to like the main UFC headquarters. They get the experience of fighting internationally in Las Vegas. Some wins you can take from that. I don't know what kind of time frame it's going to be at, if it's going to be in the middle of the night or if it's going to be in Las Vegas prime time. My guess would be it'll be in the middle of the night so that they can air it for the Asian fan base. But very interesting stuff. I don't know, like, does this mean that they're going to have it in Vegas every time going forward? I don't know. Really odd stuff going on here with UFC holding events in China. There could be some things I'm not aware of as well, but as far as the Hangzhou thing, that was more, again, of like a event permit kind of thing. And this is not, what I'm about to say is not me really like breaking any news at all. It's not reporting anything, but I did see that Song Yadong posted a video on Chinese social media of that the UFC could be, that first of all, he is negotiating his next fight now, and that it could be against Henry Cejudo is something he said. And keep in mind that like my Chinese is so not good. And so like I was doing the best I could and also like gauging other people's reactions, but I may have missed some subtle nuances of like how certain things are, or if things are anticipated or just desired. So keep that in mind as well. But it sounded like he said that that Henry Cejudo was an option that could be next, and that should be announced pretty soon. It could be announced either at this Riyadh show, or probably Dana White's going to post a video to social media here in the very near future announcing the whole UFC 305 main card in Perth. And so someone else sent me a screenshot of the War Room wall in Dana White's office and the matchmaking office. And it seemed to suggest that Song Yadong was fighting on that UFC 305 card. So, if they're going to do a Cejudo fight on that event, I think that's great. It makes sense. But otherwise, I don't have any intel on Song's next fight other than that. The other interesting tidbit that he mentioned was that, and again, this is not me reporting it. I'm not saying this is happening. This is just what Song said. He mentioned something about the UFC potentially going to Macau in October. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Being in China, but in this special administrative region, I don't know if the rules are different or perhaps easier for them to host an event outside of mainland China. And you know what I mean by mainland China? That's colloquially, that's commonly, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau are always kind of referred to as outside mainland China. It's always kind of weird verbiage there, but UFC went to Macau several times back in the early 2010s. They would go with Kung Lee. There was like the Bisping versus Kung Lee fight. There was the Franklin versus Kung Lee fight. They would go to the Venetian Macau, which was probably like 10,000 seats or less. I think a lot has changed in Macau since then. And now I think that they're trying to rebuild their like live entertainment business. And it sounds like they're trying to separate it a little bit, even from like separate their economy from the casino business, which is smart. But in doing so, they have built a pretty like fancy arena called the Galaxy Arena. And I want to say that seats somewhere between 16 and 18,000. It's like a proper like big indoor arena that's really new as well. So that makes all the sense in the world that the UFC would try to host an event there. If they're going to go to this event, keep in mind like Macau is not like a super city, and so they're going to have to like draw most of the audience from outside of Macau, people traveling from around China, from around Asia as a whole. And so I think they'd want to have a pretty big event there if they're trying to like sell this thing out, this fancy new arena. Tickets probably not on the cheaper side of things. So if Song's going to fight before that, he probably wouldn't be on the card. So all that to say, I don't really know why Song was mentioning that. If he is actually in play to be on a potential Macau card, or if he was just mentioning something that he had heard, or if he was just responding to like, when is the UFC coming to China again? Looking at the calendar, there's really not a lot of open dates, even for the fall. In terms of like, when could the UFC go? I was looking at the schedule, and in October, there's 2 pay-per-views scheduled for October already. There's one in Salt Lake City on October 5th. And then there's a pay-per-view on October 26th in Abu Dhabi, leaving just October 12th and October 19th. And it's not going to happen on October 12th. And want to know the reason why for that is that there's already an MMA event scheduled for October 12th in that Galaxy Arena. That's the Happy Elephant Champions League, which is a really interesting jump from like abandoned mall storefronts in Nanjing to a 16,000 seat fancy arena in Macau. They must really like be trying to like recruit a lot of big names to be on this card, which I haven't heard anything about that. Happy Elephant hosted a press conference on this last Tuesday about that Macau show. And as far as I could tell, there wasn't any like real big news to hang your hat on. I had to ask around a little bit because they aired this kind of hype video where they were like, they show, a lot of like shots of the arena, shots of Macau. And then they showed some highlight reel stuff from a couple big name Asian fighters. They showed like Tai Laka on there, some of his highlights. They showed Huang Fei are a lot of fighters that are from their promotion, that some of which I didn't always recognize. And then they showed, like, oddly enough, Sumit Kumar on there from India. They even showed, and then this kind of made me like take a step back, like, okay, maybe this is not like an announced roster, but they showed the Korean Zombie on there too. So I was like, maybe they're just, but they like had his name come up there. So I don't know what that was really about, but folks that I talked to said that it shouldn't be taken as like they're fighting on the card. Obviously the Korean Zombie wouldn't. And so I kind of think it was a little bit more of just like buzz. You know how sometimes like smaller promotions will do that. They'll just like put a hype video together with just like generic UFC highlights on it. So I think it would be a great platform for fighters like Tai Laka if Huang Fei wanted to get back in there as well too. Sure, but I just didn't think it was a straight up announcement. Either way, that is the way that they should be thinking of, like, let's get Tai Laka on there. Let's get every single one of the most like recognizable names that isn't under contract with WLF or JCK and throw them on this event. That is October 12th. And it's full steam ahead for that. So that really just leaves October 19th as a if it's going to be October in Macau, that would be the date. It's the only one left over. So I'll keep asking around for that. I've asked around a little bit. The few folks that I talked to on that hadn't heard anything about UFC Macau yet. So again, I'm not reporting. I'm just telling you what Song had said in his video. And even that, with the language barrier, I would refer you to check that out yourself, especially if you speak Chinese, kind of to determine like exactly what was said there. But yeah, so, and then I feel like the obvious question is, well, where does that leave a UFC show for Jakarta? Is it still happening for September? I'm not really sure. I honestly would be pretty pessimistic about that, if I'm honest. I don't know. I mean, they've got the arena there. Everything's good with that. But like, yeah, basically there's not a whole lot of spots in September already. September's kind of booked up. And especially if you're trying to do another Asian show in October, I don't know if it's ultimately going to come together. In September, you've already got UFC shows on September 7th, 14th, and 28th. So if there was a Jakarta show, it would have to be on the 21st, which could happen. And I mean, shoot, you could do back-to-back Asia shows. Nothing wrong with that. We've seen them do like European shows in close proximity. So I'll keep asking around on that. But let's hop to your questions, because I do see there's a lot, and I can only imagine with a week off, there's probably a lot of them. So Jimmy's saying, you know that I'm a big MMA fan, but what do you think of Taira getting glazed by the commentary group and even the fans through the first round of Perez versus Taira was very competitive? I mean, I kind of commented on that too. I gave my thoughts on the Taira fight, and just to summarize again, like, yeah, overall, I thought that Taira looked good. I thought he showed a lot of really intelligent offense, game planning, and gave me a lot more confidence in him for future fights in the top 10 of the division. I just, like you, I would have to watch it again maybe. I don't even know how people originally scored it, but I felt that Perez maybe could have got the better of the striking exchanges in the first round. But yeah, you know, sometimes when it's like you got a new prospect bursting onto the scene in this big fight, people can tend to, I don't know, favor him, overshoot how well he's doing, especially when he ends up winning the fight. I think that that's even more prone to happen for some reason. But I actually watched it on mute too, as I was rewatching it, because I didn't want to fall into that. But I thought the fight was pretty close up until then. It seemed like Taira was starting to inch ahead in the second round up to the unfortunate and untimely stoppage. But I think in a rematch, you know, very easily those two could have fought for 5 minutes and it could have been close. So Perez was definitely getting slept on for sure. Thoughts about 2 Indonesian fighters fighting last weekend. Well, yeah, I gave my thoughts on Jekka fighting in the UFC show. The other guy you're talking about is Bilal Hassan, which I haven't watched through the whole fight. I've only seen clips from social media of the finish, but he fought a guy named, was it Shamar Finley at CFFC last Friday evening. And yeah, just, finished him with a punching combination. Bilal Hassan is definitely a guy to get excited about, for sure. I feel like I need a couple more looks. I definitely wouldn't want to see him like on Contender Series this year. As young as he is, maybe that's a next year kind of conversation that we could have. But yeah, let's get him back in there. Let's put him, maybe in even like a CFFC title fight, see how he fares there. A lot to like, but I have to watch through the whole fight before I could really give a full assessment. We talk all the time about Weili getting disrespected despite being a great champion. What about Alexandre Pantoja? People are already asking who will beat Pantoja because he's not well-rounded. Well, yeah, I mean, he every once in a while, he'll have some exciting fights. He doesn't always have the most fan-friendly style, and he's not a very electric personality, even though I think that he is a really winsome personality. I think that he, for me, is a really hard guy to dislike, no matter who you are. But since his fights have been really like grappling heavy, I think that does lead people to be like, okay, he's going to knock this MFR out, and there's a lot of growing excitement in the flyweight division as a whole. I mean, Manel Kape, Muhammad Mokaev, Brandon Royval, Tatsuro Taira, Brandon Moreno still hanging out in the background, although he's going to be out for a while. Amir Albazi is like probably one fight away from a title shot as well. So there's a lot to love in that UFC flyweight division for sure. It could just be some overflow from some of that buzz. Pantoja is more of just a guy he's been around for a long time. He's been always a hard worker, not a lot of like high flying finishes, but just gradually inched ever closer to a title and eventually clinched it. So kind of taking an opposite direction as a lot of these prospects have. And so I think he's kind of caught up in a lot of that excitement around the division. So I don't know, I'd love to see him fight a Manel Kape. I'd love to see, I think against Mokaev, he would have a pretty easy fight. But yeah, once he starts fighting some of these young contenders, I think that is really going to bring a lot of excitement to the flyweight division. I don't know who he's going to fight next. It sounded like he is shooting for like a December return. And so I think that probably there's going to be flyweight fights in the next like 3 months. And then there's going to be a contender emerging out of that. I'd really love to see Amir Albazi back in action soon. Hopefully, it felt like he was like he was in that like number one contender fight with Brandon Moreno, and then he was injured and out of that. So I don't know what his recovery's like, but I hope that he can get back in there because it seemed like he's kind of being like forgotten with all the buzz around some of these other guys. But flyweight's fun, man, and I don't know if Pantoja will ever get the respect he deserves, even if he wins multiple more times, which he definitely could. But yeah, he's just a very workman kind of guy. So I think that's why people overlook him. Bilal Hassan, special guy. I think he's better than all the Indonesian fighters combined. You got to think the UFC's got their eye on him. If they can get their hands on Bilal Hassan and really prop him up, he could be another guy that they're just hoping to be able to build their push into Indonesia, further into Indonesia around for sure. They've got their eye on him. The Robert Whittaker of being a proper finisher. Do you remember when Gastelum and Rob Whittaker went on Tough and the coach's challenge was to run a 5K? I don't. Was that? Gosh, I mean, shows you just like how out of touch I am with Tough. I can't. You said that, and I was like, were they? It wasn't when they were on the show. It must have. I can't even remember when they were coaches, man. I don't even remember what season they were coaches. So I don't even remember that. I haven't watched this current season either. I'll try to like listen to like who's getting the buzz and then maybe try to tune in for some of those fights. But yeah, I'm so out of touch, but that's really funny. Gastelum gassed after the first lap while Whitaker did it like cake because he likes to stay in shape year round. Why are there some fighters that were really unprofessional when it comes to weight? Well, and it's timely that you bring this up because did you all see that the fight this weekend between Kelvin Gastelum and Daniel Rodriguez has already been changed to a middleweight fight? Apparently Gastelum isn't going to be able to make the weight, which is so frustrating. Like this is like 4 times it seems like that he's tried to go down to welterweight and failed. At this point, man, just give it up. Just give it up. He convinced the UFC to give him one more shot, and it's not working out. I saw someone post on Twitter today, like in reaction to that news, he's been like posting YouTube videos of him like reviewing restaurants in probably Southern California. I'm guessing that's where he still lives, but it's like, yeah, that's not a good look, man. Like, I don't know. Be a really if he doesn't make weight at 185 for this fight and he loses, I close to guarantee the UFC will just cut him. It's been too much. You've seen the UFC cut fighters for repeated weight misses and then they lose. Man, yeah. Don't know. Saying I want Lee to win, but Xiaolong has shown a great takedown defense game this tournament. He's gotten much better. He has. And I don't know what his ceiling is like, but he is still really young. I think he's 23 or 24 years old. So he is still really young. He's had a lot of amazing high-level experience for his age. Fought in Contender Series, fought in Road to UFC several times, fought in title fights for WLF. Probably around like 30 fights or so. And so, almost kind of like talking about like Pantoja and the guys that just kind of creep forward through their career. Definitely Xiaolong is that kind of guy too. I don't even know how he would do in the UFC bantamweight division. Just because I don't really know what his ceiling's like. And it seems like we've gotten some pretty mixed performances from him so far. But I think emotionally, I would love to see. I don't know if I really have a guy that I'm pulling for more. Xiaolong, I think just because he has been around for a lot longer and been really close to the opportunity. It's always good to see a guy like that get the win and get the UFC contract. But I do really like Lee Chong-ho a lot. And I think that we are due for some more Korean talent for sure. Do I know of the fighter named Mohamed Naimov? He fought Nathaniel Wood last year in UAE. He groin shot. Yeah, UFC fighter, Tajik guy, if I'm not mistaken. The ref allowed it. Clearly a dirty fighter. Why not have him fight somewhere else where he's not allowed to cheat? He's fighting this weekend, right? As far as I know, he is. He is. Yeah, he's fighting Felipe Lima, who is a bantamweight champion at the Octagon promotion in Eastern Europe. That should be interesting. And this is not in the UAE. This is in Saudi Arabia. So we'll have to see what kind of referee like the commission is like. Probably the UFC is setting that up. Maybe similar like how they do in Abu Dhabi sometimes when they travel. But yeah, I very vaguely remember that fight. But from what I hear a lot of hype around Felipe Lima. So we'll have to see. Is it confirmed yet that Islam Dulatov is fighting Ding Meng? We talked about it a few weeks ago, but there hasn't been a solid source that has confirmed it. I have still not. Maybe I can circle back to that, but last I checked, that fight was not confirmed when I like checked in on the Ding Meng side of things, and I think that either I'm pretty skeptical that it's going to happen on the original date at the very least of September 3rd. The reason I say that is because I keep track of all of the Contender Series fights, especially the ones that are like really, really solid announcements. And if you're ever curious of like where I'm writing these down, it's on my calendar on the MMA ecosystem website. Which, guys, if you check out the website, you'll notice that it is probably markedly different than the last time you saw it. I am working hard on allowing this website to be the very best that it can be, especially if you're on it on the desktop. I've made a lot of style improvements and trying to follow in some of the path of some other MMA media sites to try to just give it a facelift and really let its own style kind of emerge. Really trying to like push this forward to be as professional as I can. But if you'll notice on the September 3rd date, I've already got 5 fights written down for this September 3rd date. And then I've also got Islam Dulatov on September 3rd. So that would against a TBA opponent, just because he had come out and said that he was fighting on that date. So that adds 6 fights to the card. So one of the fights that I have posted is going to be moved or canceled outright. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but yeah, last time I checked for Ding Meng, that was not a done deal just yet. Don't know if that's going to happen. So maybe I can circle back to that and find out, but Contender Series is filling up quickly. While I know Road to UFC tournament is not super priority, I would still like for the finals to be placed way better on the card. Yeah, I mean the thing that you have to realize is that we have yet to see Road to UFC finals on an Asia specific card. Every time we've had Road to UFC finals, those have been on a Las Vegas Apex show. And then there's the fight this weekend in Riyadh. But I would imagine like if we were doing Road to UFC finals on a China show where there's like half of the fighters are from China, that they would at least put those on like the middle prelim slot. Because those fighters are fighting in front of their home fans, and it's almost no different than like having, in 2017 when the UFC made their mainland China debut in Shanghai, and they signed something like 7 Chinese fighters to fight on the card. It's no different from that, except these maybe even have a little bit more of a following, having already been in the UFC programming. So I think it would be different if it was on a different event, but just like since it's in Riyadh, and what does that work out to? So like it airs at 9 a.m. my time, so that would be, let's see, 15 hours ahead. That would be at midnight. So the Road to UFC final this weekend airs midnight China time. I think that would be 1 a.m. in South Korea, just thinking of both those two fighters. If you push that fight forward a couple more hours, then you're looking at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., probably like more likely that there's fans that are staying up late rather than getting up early. So I get it for the Riyadh card. And I think why they put it on that card is it was just like the earliest that they could do when both were ready. I remember a couple years ago, Khamzat wanting to retire from MMA due to health issues. Then the warlord Kadyrov makes him do MMA. What are your thoughts on that controversial topic? I don't know. I really don't know how much of an influence Kadyrov had, if it was just kind of gave him some encouragement to keep fighting MMA, or if it was something more serious than that. It's really impossible for us to really know how much he pushed him or just gave him a little bit of a pep talk. So I don't know. I don't want to read too much into that. And there's a lot of times when like a fighter will maybe have like a debilitating injury or a health issue, and they consider retirement when they're in the thick of it because you're like, how could I ever recover from this? This sport is just asking so much of me, even though a couple years ago, it was recovering from COVID was the thing, wasn't even sport related. But yeah, I mean, he's been such an interesting case, and it sounds like, again, if the reports are true, that this instance of him pulling out was totally a freak kind of thing with food poisoning. So I'm willing to, like, I guess, forgive it again. I don't think we should hold it against him for pulling out this time for health kind of stuff, unless there's more that we don't know about. But yeah, hard to totally comment on that. Would you want to see Hassan in Contender Series? I know it's early in his career, though. No, let him flesh things out a little bit more. Let him fight for a belt, get 2 to 3 more fights in the system. No need to rush it. I always say I would rather a fighter be over-prepared than under-prepared going into the UFC. So, no, I say let's wait till next year, if not even the year after that. But probably I bet you'll see him next year because the UFC is really going to want to, like, get their hands on him. But also they don't – I think they'll be smart and, like, not trying to, like, send him to the UFC too quickly before he's ready. But yeah, maybe next year. Hey, what do you think? Do you think, I see what you're doing there. Do I think Topuria could lose to, you almost got me there. I do read ahead the questions. Nice try. I think Road to U for experience will be good, but Contender Series, Road to UFC next year doesn't matter. He's already beating vets like Finley. Yeah, that is the other question, is Contender Series or Road to UFC. I actually wouldn't mind Road to UFC. I think that would be a really good way. I don't know what kind of, like, connection he really has to Indonesian fans, since he is US based. And doesn't, as far as I know, has he ever fought in Indonesia? I don't think he has. And so I think if you put him in Road to UFC, that could be really strategic because you could build that connection with the Indonesian community. So this guy is only 4-0, which is pretty raw. He's 22 years old. And he's only fought for CFFC and Koga Combat Games, which is it's a Washington State based promotion. I put in all their results, so I'm pretty familiar with them. Man, I'd love it if you could come back to Koga, because I would love to report on that. I do wonder how he got hooked up with CFFC, because that's like the clear other side of the country. But yeah, we've seen guys like Mark Climaco go to Road to UFC, and I think that could be a really good game plan for Hassan as well. So on X, you said, Leon, you're arguing that Leon Edwards is really skilled in a unique welterweight. And then a guy turned the conversation to, if Leon beats Islam, Bilal, Khamzat, and Drakus, he would still not be considered the GOAT. To me, that's a good resume. That's a pretty good resume. There are some fighters that can get a great resume, but still never in that conversation. I don't know if there's anyone that would have I mean, the guys that you just listed off, Khamzat, you could argue he's the number one prospect, isn't the right word, but like the hottest fighter that isn't a champion right now. You could argue that he's that guy. Bilal fighting for a title shot, long unbeaten streak. Islam, in my opinion, number one pound for pound fighter. And then Drakus, who's a middleweight champion, But those are 3 different weight classes, champions in 2 different weight classes. First of all, I don't think that's likely to happen that he would fight all of them. Also, it's kind of a weird turn to take that conversation from like he's a really skilled and unique welterweight to like putting the burden of like, well, if he did this, he still wouldn't be the GOAT. You know, I mean, if he was able to like rattle off those wins in succession, then I think you could be under that consideration. The thing is, you just don't know what kind of performance he's going to turn in from all those fighters. I mean, would you still say that if he was getting finishes over all of these fighters? You're asking about, are there fighters that are kind of in that category of, you know, an amazing resume, but still not considered the GOAT? Well, yeah, I mean, like, I'm trying to think who had the better resume out of. The thing is like fighters will have these amazing resumes, but then they'll lose a handful of fights as they get older. And so I feel like a lot of people knock him out of the GOAT conversation with that. George St. Pierre was kind of an exception. I mean, George St. Pierre, between the GOAT conversation for me, like, okay, greatest of all time, recency, playing no factor, it's John Jones for me. And then it's George St. Pierre right behind him just by a little bit. And then after that, it's probably Anderson Silva, which, you know, we talk about GOAT kind of conversations and pound for pound stuff all the time. But out of those, who's had the best resume? Maybe John Jones slightly. But, you know, GSP, John Jones has fought at 2 weight classes. GSP has won titles at 2 weight classes, as is John Jones. But yeah, I mean, we'd have to see, right? It's when Leon's at the position that he's at, where he's his title fights have been against Covington and Usman. And then, you know, he's going to fight against Bilal coming up. He's fighting like pretty like classical, like welterweight fixtures, but he hasn't fought up or down in weight. See what happens. I mean, it's just so hard to judge these things from our vantage point in history right now. Saw that Kaya Sakura wants to fight at 125. That seems reasonable since 135 is a hard division at the top 5. Agree. I mean, yeah, I would definitely say flyweight is a slightly easier division, but gosh, it's getting harder. It seems like every single week. And the other thing is like Asakura has typically been at 135, and he's a pretty good size 135er. So it's going to be a pretty big cut. You know what that also makes me wonder is that going to delay his UFC debut a little bit more? Because, unless he's been shooting for this, kind of preparing for this for a long time, but dropping down from 135 to 125 takes a lot of work. So, but yeah. And then the comment below says, if Kai is fighting flyweight, he should get Kai Car France. That'd be absolute fireworks. I know. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to match up Kaya Sakura at flyweight, I think the matchmaking is a lot more interesting. Like from a logical stance, that makes a lot more sense, right? Like, beef up flyweight as much as you can. Bantamweight right now, super, super stacked. Although you look at it, and a lot of these fighters are getting a little bit older, at least a lot of guys in the top 5. I mean, got Figueiredo, he's in his upper 30s. Cejudo's in his upper 30s. Sandhagen, I think, is maybe 34, 35. Marab, mid 30s. And then you've got Aldo at number 8. Rob Font is in his upper 30s. So it's interesting. You do have a lot. You could see some turnover in bantamweight in the next couple of years. We also got Dominic Cruz still in the rankings. But yeah, it's like if you're wanting to take the shortest and easiest path to the title, definitely flyweight is easier. It's just a matter of the weight for sure. And I mean, I love the idea of the UFC like signing fighters specifically for beefing up the flyweight division. Yeah, I love that. said you want to see Kai versus Tatsuro, but they probably won't do it unless it's for the title. Yeah, I don't love that right now either. I say like let both of those guys like. I mean, shoot. I mean, that'd be a great fight, right? I mean, that'd be an amazing fight. But I'm with you. I would rather see that for the title as well. Did I see where Chaudhry said that this year they will be profitable on his Facebook? Seems like a weird flex considering his company is run on investors that never see a return. Well, yeah, the thing about that is that we really just don't know. We have no idea what One Championship's finances are right now. We've got some like pointers here and there, but it's just so hard to know. Since they moved their HQ to the Cayman Islands, we have no idea what their finances are. And I mean, the thing is, whether you are a one fan or not, the thing is that Chaudhry just constantly speaks in hyperbole and constantly says things that are not true or don't end up panning out. Like it is near impossible to trust anything that he says, especially about their financial situation, especially since every single thing that he says is meant to like give a positive slant on things, attract investors, sell tickets, no matter what. There's so much just like glitter on everything that it's impossible for us to trust him at this point, unless he like were publicly to or find a way to like publicly post their financial statements, which he's not going to do. I don't trust that. I looked for a reaction from Deal Street Asia's Christy Neo, who originally posted that their financial runway was going to run out this year. Her quote was, so Chaudhry had said, I'm looking at this on my phone here, says revenues will approach 20 million on a run rate basis this year, registering approximately 50% growth as compared to 2023 numbers. And then Christy Neo, who gave this wonderful report earlier this year on One's finances, said revenue run rate of 200 million does not mean annual revenue of 200 million. I also wonder how much of this is adjusted profit and cash flow, which is a great point, because if you remember a couple of years ago, One had self-reported their finances, basically that a lot of their income was based off of barter deals. In other words, exchanging service for service with businesses or individuals. And they attach dollar amounts to a projected value of some of those barter exchanges. But the problem is that there's really no way to fully know what the value of those were. And a lot of people had suggested that the value of some of those barter exchanges was conflated as well, to One's advantage. So, how much of this is adjusted profit and cash flow? More importantly, what is your cash burn rate? So that's true. Revenue is not the same as profit. And there's a few words in there that I don't fully understand, as I'm not an economist, but it definitely does lead to greater questions. And then Chaudhry also went back to the whole like, oh, Nielsen loves us, blah, blah, blah. The thing is like for any business, and I could do this even with my business, you can always find a statistic, a number out there, even if it's just one, and you can build a whole, you can build a whole like campaign strategy to win investors and support off that one statistic, even though there may be a lot of other things that give a lot more context. So I don't feel like anything has changed for me. Like I still don't know what to make of One's finances at all. And I'll still never forgive them for putting all these fighters on ice for so many years and wrecking so many MMA fighters' careers. One of my thoughts on opinion about your opinion about Dagestani fighters. First, need to mention that I'm not Islamophobic or anti-Muslim. Dagestani fighters have the luxury to pull out of fights and take fights when they aren't injured because of Khabib hanging out with Kadyrov and are financially stable so they can take fights. They're able to pursue fighting as a job, which a lot of MMA fighters, even getting into the UFC, still have to do it part-time. Agree or bad opinion? I mean, the facts is that, yeah, a lot of them have extra sources of wealth. And so they don't have to like work as a paramedic on the side. The other thing that, and also keep in mind, like a lot of those Dagestani fighters, I could be totally wrong, but I haven't seen most of them like hanging out with Kadyrov. And so I don't know what kind of value that actually has. Some of them do, but definitely not all of them. Like, is going to a birthday party the same thing as getting a blank check from Kadyrov or a Rolls Royce? I don't know. The other thing that you have to realize is that most of those fighters are represented by Dominance MMA, Ali Abdelaziz. And if you all... I thought this was really interesting. I actually was watching it even up to like 5 minutes before going live. There's that documentary produced by Roku channel about, forget what it's called, something like Inside the UFC, something like that. But super, super highly recommend watching it. You literally can just type in Roku channel and then go to the website and search for UFC. It's free to watch. Really highly recommend. There is a scene in that documentary when Dana and the matchmakers and Hunter Campbell are in the war room talking about making fights. And then someone's like, oh, Ali's in the kitchen right now. And he's like, oh, and Dana's like, oh, okay. And then he goes into the kitchen, the UFC kitchen. Ali Abdelaziz is in there. Khabib is in there. And they're just they're hanging out, eating food. Dana kind of like pitches a fight to him of like, hey, how about Kamaru versus Shavkat? And then Ali comes back with like, ooh, what about Kamaru versus Stephen Thompson? And then Khabib, like, and I love this, Khabib actually disagreed with Ali. He was like, no, like when you're an older guy, like you have a responsibility to let the younger guys test themselves against you and like still prove that you're able to beat the young guys. Kind of in favor of like the Shavkat versus Usman fight. But it was just so interesting to me that just like you almost got the feeling that like Ali Abdelaziz almost just has like the keys to the UFC headquarters, and they didn't even know he was there. Like Khabib and Ali, they can seem like they can just kind of come and go as they please. And so, I mean, definitely don't underestimate the kind of power that this guy has as a manager. I definitely think that part of what you're talking about is not even just like I don't even think it's a UFC favoritism towards a certain kind of fighter. I just think that they're represented by one of the most powerful figures in all of MMA, who's able to get them really good purses, who's able to advocate strongly for good fights for them that are so yeah. I mean, I've never doubted Ali Abdelaziz's ability as a manager, even though, yeah, maybe there's some like, there might be some compromising going on between the UFC and him, but that's how he's gotten that power at the same time. So I think that's mostly Ali Abdelaziz's power in the UFC. Can I see UFC Jakarta actually happening this year? Still one spot left in September calendar that hasn't been booked as far as I know. It could happen. But I would... if the UFC goes to Jakarta, they're probably not going to fill it out with Indonesian fighters. They would put Jekka on there. I don't think they would go to Jakarta if Jekka was not on the card, even though he is like, kind of at the bottom of the featherweight rankings right now. But they would want to put Jekka on the card. That would be silly. So it depends on him. And aside from that, I think if they went to Jakarta, even a month before another Macau show. I think they go to Macau, that would definitely be a lot of Chinese fighters. They would stack it with as many as they could. Shoot, you could even see like a Weili versus Suarez title fight on there. I don't know. But for going to Jakarta, I would think that it would be a little bit. I don't think that they would try to like stack the card super, super thick. I think they would get whoever they could, make a really international card. Jekka would be on there, a couple other Asian fighters. Gosh, there's not even any other fighters from Southeast Asia that they could put on the card on the roster right now. So I don't know. Maybe they put, Anshul on there. It would feel very much to me like a Singapore card. I think that they would build it the same way that they would a Singapore fight night. So they could, if they did it that way. The question is there enough Asian talent to like put an Asian in every single fight on both cards, and then maybe a couple like big fights with more international fighters at the top? They could. I don't think it's a bad idea. I say like just give the Indonesian fans something. Like just doesn't matter who's on the card. Put together some decent fights, and I think that's enough for now. So it could happen. I just feel like, especially with the Macau show in October being a rumor, and the where they're at with Indonesian talent, and then with the calendar starting to tighten up, it seems just more unlikely to me. But I could be wrong. We've talked about, and just a few more here. We've talked about plagiarism before, but why do you think when a person on X gets called out for plagiarism, they start to block the person that called them out? Lack of accountability. I think mostly because the vast majority of people that would follow them don't even know that who they're following is committing plagiarism. So it's really easy to copy and paste a tweet and post it and get a following, because you're essentially just skimming the following off of much bigger accounts. So if you don't have a moral compass to direct you away from that, then like, sure, by all means, I guess keep doing it. It's not like we're in college or high school where you get in trouble for plagiarism. Twitter doesn't care. So yeah, if there's no consequence to it, then why are you going to stop doing it? The consequence is that you're never going to get hired or never going to get, the opportunities that you really want in MMA media. But if all that you're after is a Twitter following, then that's probably it, but that's all that you'll get. I want to talk about Suarez propaganda tour fueled by the major media. Hey, get mad at the media outlets. Get mad at ESPN or whoever for that. It's not, if ESPN shows up to your doorstep and says, we want to make a documentary about you, then who's going to say no to that? She's talking like it was Weili's responsibility to call her out right after UFC 300. She said it's weird that Weili didn't mention her at all, but she didn't mention anyone. Why would it ever be the champion's responsibility to call out a challenger? When Weili does call out a challenger, people get mad, so she stayed quiet. It seems to me that Suarez is really acting like Colby Covington because of her trash talk. I wish Weili would just shut her up. I mean, I understand a fighter advocating for themselves. That's all I think it is I think, if we're honest, like Suarez is the fighter right now that everyone wants to see, or the vast majority of people want to see Suarez get the next strawweight title shot. And so looking at it from that angle, it seemed like, since there isn't like a wealth of contenders at strawweight, it seemed like that was really the only logical call out. And so I think Suarez was just kind of like, advocating for herself. Like this would have made sense for you to do that. So looking at it from her perspective, I can understand why she would feel that way. Does the UFC love going to UAE because there's no commission? There is a commission. Well, there's not a national commission. The UFC basically like brings their own commission. But they also love going to the UAE because of the huge site fees. That's why they love going to the UAE. Is combat sports riding a skill? Oh, absolutely. Any kind of riding is a skill. I'm not talking about analysis, talking more about sports reporting. Aaron Bronstetter this year has written many nuanced articles, but everyone else just keeps copying news. Yeah, it is. And it's hard, like, and this is a timely question for me because where I'm at with my website is I'm really trying to increase my article output every week. I have a quota that I have, and I try to like schedule things way in advance. Some things you can't always know if it's like breaking news, but yeah, it's like it's hard not to just like write, even if you're not copying, write in the exact same voice that you hear every time you read another article, especially if it's just kind of a standard news release of like fighter A against fighter B, announcing an event, things like that. I think it is a skill, and I don't always know that it super matters that you like try to tell the super compelling story when you're just like announcing fighter A against fighter B or an event. I think that there is still a level of storytelling that you should consider, but it's not necessary that you like talk about the trials that this fighter went through when they were a child, when you're discussing a news release. So otherwise, I think it's like, people are there for the facts, but just give a little bit of storytelling to it. Even just like making sure that your spelling and grammar is decent, and that the whole thing is cohesive, and that you're not like favoring one fighter or the other. So really, like if you just read like, some of the top reporters, when they do that, you can get a sense for it. But yeah, and then you're going into like opinions, editorials, analysis, all that stuff, and that's a whole different world. But it is. I mean, I've read articles that should have just been run of the mill news reporting that didn't really make sense or weren't always very cohesive. You kind of have to read it a couple times, or it may not be, or it may be missing really clear, obvious information. Like, wait, what's the date of this? Or I'd like to know, like, okay, what's his record? Where is he from? Things like that. Would be nice to know a little bit more context. And if you don't know that, to say like, it's unknown. This bit of information is unknown at the time, just to acknowledge like that we don't know. That just covering more of your bases. Oh man, I would love to answer more of these questions, but I do have to head out. I've got something coming up in the evening that I've got to head to. So I do apologize that I can't get to all those questions. But if you want, save them for next week, and I will get to those next week. I shouldn't have any kind of barrier on my time next week in the evening, but really appreciate all the support, you guys. I will be reporting, covering all the events this weekend. So I'll be locked in. Catch me on all my socials. And until next time, enjoy the fights, guys.